A little bonus clock video setup if it happens to strike you. If you take apart one of these mechanisms, a lot of things, I have a video on how to take apart, I'll put a link in the show notes below, on how to take it apart and make sure you're taking good photos and everything. But one of the things that didn't really show up in the photos or in any manuals or anything is getting the gong, the hourly chime gong, to be lifting and hammering and then stopping correctly. And what controls that is the small snail gear. So let's look at that real carefully. What actually controls it starting and stopping is this little small snail gear back here. I've got some pieces taken off right now. And if it's in the, and it can go in 4 different positions. And that's important that it's on a shaft that's a square. Because based on which one of those 4 positions you put that snail gear, I've got it so I can take this apart right now because I've been running the clock without this catch in there. And this is the snail gear here. It looks like a cam. Well, there's the only position it needs to be in is so that this J arm here, this double J arm, can stop this cam from turning once it's done counting off. Once it's done counting off the wherever it happens to be at on the set here, which gets set based on the center shaft here, this large snail gear that picks the hour. But what actually does the chiming is back in here. Photo fun. It's this shaft right here, which controls that, and it's got like a little silver arm that comes off the shaft, goes inside the clock mechanism like a hook back in there. Let me get a pointer. And back here is the sharp tooth sprocket right there. You can see these really sharp, it looks like a spur. It's physically connected to this sprocket, which is hooked to this pinion, which is hooked into the drive ratchet at the bottom. And so that spur back there, yeah, there it is. That spur back there, these turn with that sprocket and they lift this right here, this guy, which happens to be what lifts the hammers. And so if you pull that out, you can see there's a little piece of steel right there that's permanently fixed to this arbor shaft here, or it's just a shaft, and it comes in and it engages with that spur gear back there, and that's what lifts and hits the hour. And with the relation between that and the small snail gear is what controls whether or not this is in warning, essentially, and ready to lift, or it's already mostly lifted. And if it's already mostly lifted, you're just going to get this in motion and nothing's really going to happen, or it's going to stop funny. You want it to end like that. Now, there's really no adjustment. You don't want to take apart your whole clamshell gear mechanism here in order to change where that's at, that spur gear. Nor do you want to change the position of this unless you already took it off. Then you'd have to run the clock and get the set exactly back where it needs to be, which is, in my case, just a little bit lower than that. But you can get that fixed once you get everything back together. It's adjustable, but I didn't take mine apart, so I didn't want to mess with that. But the snail gear here controls where it stops, and the snail gear is on a square shaft. And because it's on a square shaft, you can move it 4 different places. And so I put it in the correct position of the 4, and then ran the clock just to prove that it was definitely gonging and stopping, and that spur gear was lined up correctly with its lift shaft. So that's a little adjustment I thought I'd share. Didn't know that was going to happen to me when I reassembled my clock. That one was a little bit of a trick. And I had one other thing not assembled correctly with the clock, which didn't come out until after I posted the video on setting up the clock, and that is that it wasn't chiming. The musical chime, the melody, was about a quarter hour or half hour out. That's controlled by this drum up here, which has these little spikes on it. That's what lifts the hammers. And if that drum isn't in the right place at the beginning of the hour, or essentially the beginning of a half hour, then the melody, the Westminster chime, will not be in the correct sequence. And some YouTube viewers notified me right away that was out of sequence, and my son had also been complaining. I was like not noticing it. So it just means I have to roll that drum
to the beginning of the beginning of the melody when it's at the beginning of the quarter hour. Well, this shaft right here goes out to the quarter hour cam, and the quarter hour cam controls where it stops. This transverse gear here is what takes the rotation of that up to and rolls the drum up there. That's what rolls the drum. So that transverse gear needs to be at the right starting spot on this arbor here. So what you do is you get a screwdriver in there and you just loosen the set screw right here, right there, and then you back this off of this transverse steel gear, right, that goes up right here on this shaft. And then you turn your drum. So you just roll your drum to the beginning of the song. Because you'll be at the quarter hour at that time, and then you line this back up with that gear, and then tighten it back down again. And don't put too much pressure on this. Don't engage those teeth too tightly, otherwise you'll put too much load on the clock. So you want these just to come up and just mesh nicely and with this other gear right here. If you over tighten that, you'll actually stop the clock. It won't be able to turn. And then you'll be fine. Then when you run the clock, you will have your quarter hour melody in proper sequence. And thanks to the YouTube viewers who notified me of that, and my son who just didn't know how to communicate it. That's it. Thanks for joining for the bonus videos.